Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Fast. In today's episode, I'd like to offer some analysis and a recap of both the Indy 500 and the Monaco Grand Prix, which took place on Sunday, May 25th, both of them respectively. I actually went to Indianapolis this weekend to see the Indy 500. It was my first ever IndyCar race in person. It was my first ever full length IndyCar race. For the most part, I've been watching race highlights or just like analysis by other creators. And in the last few weeks, I've been taking it to myself to get into IndyCar because I have a theory that some of the most dominant IndyCar drivers are going to be selected for the new Cadillac team for F1 next season. And so I've been just keeping an eye out on what's going on. And the Indy 500 is a really great way to see who's dominating, what's going on, and basically what the conversation about motorsport is in America. So the Indy 500 is a race that takes place in Indianapolis on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's on a super speedway, which is an oval, and the race is run to 500 miles. And since the track is 2.5 miles long, the race is 200 laps in total. All of the finishers of the Indy 500, they compete in the IndyCar Championship, and if you finish the race, you get to contribute points to both your manufacturer and your personal championship points. Unlike F1, where teams receive points for their drivers and how they finish, in IndyCar, only the manufacturers, so for example, Chevy or Honda, the people that make the engines, they're having their own competition rather than Chip Ganassi Racing or Arrow McLaren Racing having a battle or multiple battles between teams. It happens between the manufacturers and then an overall driver championship. Okay, now let's get on to the race itself. The race starts with 33 drivers. And similar to Formula One, they all qualify. But it's not based on the fastest lap time. It's based on the fastest average speed over 4 laps. And so the grid is set up 33 drivers, 3 abreast into each, like the lanes they started on the grid. It's 3 on the front row, 3 on the second row, so on and so forth. So there's 10 rows in total. 11 rows in total because there's 33 drivers. Sorry, I can do math. In the beginning of the race, there was a little bit of rain. So they decided to delay the start by about, I would say, 45 minutes. They said it was going to be a short delay, but honestly, by the time it got started, it had been an hour since the Penske guy had, get ready to start your engines and stuff like that. So yeah, it had taken a while for the race to start, but I had made some friends. I was getting chatting, and I was just enjoying the atmosphere, the Blackhawks, the parasail glider people. They had F-150s, the planes or F-140s, whatever they're called, flying over the track, with the parade lap of the drivers. And so the drivers started with a 3-lap parade with a pace car. And the pace car in IndyCar is very much equivalent to the safety car in Formula One. They do the same thing, they just name everything different in IndyCar. And so the pace car led them all around. And Michael Strahan, the football guy, he was driving the pace car. He was struggling, though, because you have to drive it at 100 miles an hour, which is slow for the IndyCar drivers. But if you're in a Corvette on a speedway, you're pushing that shit. And if you're Michael Strahan, a football guy, somebody tells you to go in a Corvette and drive 100 miles, they're not joking. They were telling that man to push because he was backing all black people up. But before the race even started, while the pace car was out and everyone was warming up their tires, Scott McLaughlin tweaked his front left tire onto the barrier and just ended his race before it even began, before the green flags were even out. And because it was the last lap the pace car had went in, they just threw the yellow cautions on and started the race. And so the first 8 laps of the race were under caution, which is essentially being under a safety car, driving at about 120 miles an hour, which when your top speed is 200 miles an hour, it's pretty slow. For the drivers, at least. I was oh my God. But for the drivers, of course, 120 miles is I don't know, doing 25 on a city course. That's not fun for them, especially. And this wasn't McLaughlin's first crash. He crashed the week before in quali, really wrecked his car, and it was a feat of engineering and his mechanics, and shout out to them for managing to rebuild that car in time to get him not only racing, but qualifying and participating and all that kind of stuff. And it was obviously really sad to see such an accomplished driver crashed out in the barriers. It was really just like he was heating up his tires and he swerved to the left too hard and hit the barrier. Like, that's what happens. I'm sure there was a little bit of wetness. I'm sure the track was a little damp and that totally factored in. And the ambient temperature was about 63 and the track temperature was about 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's pretty cold for tires, for race car drivers and all that kind of stuff. Your tires don't heat up the same. Things really aren't functioning the way that they should be, and so accidents happen. He wasn't the only one. Scott McLaughlin, Marco Andretti, they all crashed within the first 8 laps of the race. That's why we had our cautions. They were taking up the cars off the tracks with the tractors that they use, and so on and so forth. Um, Overall, I would rate the Indy 500 as a little bit of a mess. I am an Indy noob, so of course you can take all of my happenings and thoughts with a grain of salt, but I would really say that race was a mess. Scott Dixon, in the start of the race, his back right brake duct caught on fire, and he was still racing. And you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to let your brake duct be on fire and continue racing. It's a safety hazard for yourself, for the other people on track, especially in a sport where refueling is allowed. That doesn't like that. You shouldn't be refueling when your brake duct is on fire. But obviously the Indy 500 is like go big or go home, and so he kept that car out on track until eventually the car couldn't cope anymore, and he had to essentially he DNF'd. He didn't finish. And so yeah, I was genuinely concerned for Scott Dixon's tires and for his well-being and safety. And another huge risk that happened at the race was Alex Rossi. His car caught on fire while he was in the pits. Probably gas spilled onto his hot tires in the hot brake duct, and he literally caught on fire. He had to get out of there. Obviously, I think he was pretty fine. Distraught, of course, because his race was over. And that's really hurtful. And like, it's sad to see a team get out like that. But a fire is very serious, and they managed to put it out. Everybody was safe. That was also really nice. I would say my third example of this race being a mess was Robert Schwartzman body slamming his mechanics with his car. He was going into the pits. He kind of was about to miss his marks, and so he really hit the brakes, but he overshot too far to the left and ran over like 4 of his mechanics. And at that point, he couldn't do anything because he couldn't change his tires or like refuel or anything like that because he ran over his mechanics. And so that effectively ended the pole sitters race as well. And so, yeah, there was just a lot happening at all times with this race. But I would say it wasn't even like excitement. I was just like concerned for the safety of it all. And speaking of safety, there was a caution thrown in the middle of the race because of a light drizzle. And I was really confused as to why they couldn't race in the rain, because in Formula One, I mean, look at Brazil 2024. Obviously, they did red flag the race, but they were letting them race in the rain. It happened in Japan a few years ago as well. Racing in the rain in Formula One is very common, and even in IndyCar, actually, you are allowed to race on wet tires, but the issue is that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a very fast track, and so they don't take any chances with the speeds that the drivers are going at, especially since it's a banked track, and they don't allow the drivers to race on wet tires. It's just not safe at all, which... Great job, IndyCar, for taking note of that, at least. I'm sorry, I'm like, I shouldn't be shitting on them, but like, I low-key am. Let's see. So one of the favorites to win the race was Takuma Sato. He is a 2-time Indy 500 champion. And I would say for the first 100 laps, I really thought that he had it. He started the race in second position, let Robert really take the lead in the first few laps. He overtook, led a few laps himself, honestly had really good control of the pace of everything. He was even at the start for one of the restarts, and so I was really rooting for Takuma Sato, obviously, just because honestly I support minorities. If you're a minority, I'm gonna support you. Like, that's, I like have no shame about that. I will. So I was supporting Takuma, but then from what I've like seen from some of the Indy 500 recaps and highlights that I've watched, it like doesn't really matter if you're really leading the first 100 laps because of how many pit stops everybody's taking and cautions and just all the variables that can factor into a 200 lap race. That leading or dominating the first 100 laps is like it's not necessarily to your benefit. You want to come back stronger in the end and really start to overtake. That's what we saw Alex Palou did, Pato Award, Marcus Ericsson. Malukas had been running in the front for pretty much all of the race in the top three. I think he even led a few laps at one point. But by the end of the race, you could really tell that it was between Malukas, Pato Award, Marcus Ericsson, who was also a previous champion of the Indy 500, and Alex Palou, who is a three-time IndyCar, like the actual racing series champion. He just had never actually won the Indy 500 before. And so by the end of the race, last 50 laps or so, I would say, is really when everything started to like pick up again and like a lot more stuff was happening. A few people pitted. And that left Marcus Ericsson and Alex Palou, Malukas, I don't know his first name, Malukas, and Pato Award as the top four, with a few like stragglers, some people who had pitted, let's say, like at the end of lap 155, and they came out right before the lap lead, like they didn't get lapped essentially. And I would say the fact that they didn't get lapped was a harm rather than a help. Obviously, the person in the front, who at that point was Ericsson, was getting a good draft, a good slipstream from the people in front of him, especially because they were racing faster with fresher tires. But what made it harder was at one point when you are in such a big slipstream towards the back, you aren't necessarily feeling all the benefits. And so I could really tell that Palou, I could really tell that Palou, Malukas, and Pato were really trying to put the pressure onto Ericsson at the front, but it was getting very difficult. Eventually, Palou did succeed. He took over the lead in the last 5 to 10 laps of the race, and took it home, eventually won. Congrats to Alex Palou, of course, because that's a huge deal. 500 miles, winning the Indy 500, especially since he's already winning the IndyCar Championship as of 2025, and he's won 2021, 23, and 24. And so he's had a lot to prove, of course, and even he said that it doesn't matter necessarily to him if he had won 3, 4, 5 championships. Winning the Indy 500 is what makes you an IndyCar star. And we can take Joseph Newgarden, for example, too, who, like, he won the, like, you wouldn't know Alex Palou last year or 2 years ago. I knew Joseph Newgarden. I didn't know Alex Palou. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you win the Indy 500, your name gets etched into history. Your face is on that trophy. Like, it's a big deal. And, of course, winning it is, like, one of the biggest accomplishments you can have as a race car driver. One of the other things that I would say was a damper to the race was the last lap's pit stop and the refueling of it all. In Formula One, they banned refueling in the middle of races. Obviously, in a 500 lap race, that's not going to happen. You're going to need to refuel your car. But I feel like it would have made the racing a lot better if the cars had a lighter load and they were like racing on a lighter load. Because if you're off the racing line, you're picking up the graining and the marbles of the tire. So if you just pitted and your fuel tank is full, yes, you have new tires, but one, the track is cold, so it's going to take a while to heat up. So you need to stay on the racing line. You can't pick up any additional weight on the marbles, and you've just refueled, so your tank is kind of full now. I don't know. I just feel like it could have been a more interesting race. A lot could have been different. However, I'm not the only person who thought that. Pato Award at the end of the race, even he said it, that it was pretty boring. There was a lot of restart issues, people crashing. Pato had mentioned that a lot of the issues with the restarts were because the people in the lead weren't speeding up the way that they need to be. I'm excited, of course, to get more into IndyCar, hopefully to see the Indy 500 live in person again, and change my opinion about IndyCar. I'm totally going to keep on following it still because it's relevant to Formula One, but you know, who knows what's going to happen after the Cadillac team joins. I don't know. I can't say that I'm going to keep on following IndyCar. But let's talk about Monaco. After last year's first lap crash and the other 17 drivers pitting in the first lap, completing their mandatory pit stop, and then just running the race with those tires until the end, the FIA knew that they knew the FIA knew that they needed to do something to make the race more interesting for watchers, for the people who spend $100,000 to dock their boat, for the people who travel from all over the world to come to Monaco. Similar to the Indy 500, Monaco is the biggest race for Formula One. It's the most iconic race. It's one of the reasons why they're so notable. If you don't know, Monaco is a street track. It takes place in the Principality and it spans the whole Principality. And essentially, because these are European roads, they're rather narrow. And so, what the idea was is if we make the drivers pit stop twice, that it'll change up strategy, it'll make everything so much different and exciting, and hopefully bring some more excitement and energy into the Monaco Grand Prix. One of the interesting strategy calls of the race was between Racing Bulls and Williams and the team game that they played in order to let their drivers pit in a orderly fashion or in a fashion that would allow them to maintain track position. So we can take Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar as our first example. Liam held the back of the field up. Isaac pitted. Liam still held them back. 4 laps later, Isaac pitted again. That was it. He was done. Maybe by like lap 25, he completed all of his pit stops. They went on about their business. The Racing Bulls finished with double points for the first time in the season. Liam picked up his first points of the season. Isaac increased his position in the driver championship to 10th place. Great stuff for Racing Bulls. They've honestly had a strong car the whole season and a really strong driver in Isaac. And so it's really nice for them to get this sort of award or to manage the double point score at the race. On to Williams. They played a similar game, but in a I guess more like strategic fashion. So initially what happened is Carlos Sainz held up the field driving slowly and Alex Albon went and did his pit stops. They swapped and Carlos Sainz took off while Alex held the rest of the field back so Carlos could take his pit stops. Great stuff by the Williams team. James Vowles, I will say this every single day, has been turning that team around and doing some great work for them. And I'm really happy to see Williams back, not at the top, but they're not DNFing and they don't have Gotifi on their team. So things are going well for them. And I'm really happy for them. And this is their third consecutive points finish, double points finish at that. And so they're really putting on a strong performance this year. And, you know, hats off to them. Congrats, Williams. And so now I know what you're thinking. How did Alex, Carlos, and Liam manage to hold up the rest of the field in the manner that they did? As I'd mentioned, these new Formula One cars are much wider and longer than the original Formula One cars that were used on the Monaco streets. They haven't made the Monaco streets wider, they've only made the Formula One cars bigger. And so what happens is these cars are already like up at the barrier. There is no place to do an overtake except for maybe like turn one or down in the hairpin. But it's really hard to do an overtake in Formula One during the Monaco Grand Prix. And that's how holding back the rest of the field plays to the advantage of some of these teams where you know no one's going to be able to pass you and you can just drive slow and hold up the rest of the field so your teammate can pit. And a lot of the drivers were talking about that's just not their way to go racing. It's not the way racing like has ever been done or should be done, where you're not even trying to be fast. You're trying to be slow. This is the pinnacle of motorsport, people. Like, we shouldn't be doing this. But there's no way Monaco is leaving the calendar anytime soon. The business it brings in, the notoriety, the money, just Monaco is a legacy race. It's a legacy track, and I just don't see, maybe they're gonna put it on rotation like how they did for Spa, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon for the Monaco Grand Prix. It's just too iconic, especially with a Monegasque driver in the field. It'd be really like be jarring for the Monegasque people. Like, oh my god, like we finally did it. I just really don't think it's gonna happen. So since I've been talking about the Indy 500 and the Monaco Grand Prix, I want to put those two races in conversation with one another. Both of them are legacy tracks, legacy races, and the governing body of the sport, relatively, will most likely never get rid of these races, no matter how boring they are or how little action takes place. Some of the IndyCar people are going to be in the comments, and honestly, you should comment and subscribe while you're at it. Some of the IndyCar people are going to be in the comments like there were 12 different races, but that was because they pitted, and the track is like so small that of course if you pit, there's going to be a new race leader, and there's just no time with the size of the track to pit and come out first again. That's just not going to happen in in the in, that's just not going to happen at the Indy, and you just won't see anything like that happen at IMS, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And so, yes, there were 11 different race leaders, 12 race lead changes, but except for like Alex Palou, I don't really remember anybody actually overtaking for the lead. Rather, it was like a pit stop thing. And I could be wrong. I was sitting at turn 1, so I just saw the end of the straight and into the second straight. Maybe I missed something, and some of the video was just of the front, so I couldn't really see the back, and like it's also really hard to see what's going on because they're moving so fast. So maybe I missed something. Comment if I did. Let me know. But I don't think I did. And yeah, I just think that a lot of these races do more for the sport than they do the driver or the entertainment factor. And like I was saying before, Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway greater area is so in tune with what is going on. They're so excited for it. The people I was sitting with actually, I wasn't sitting with them. The people who were sitting behind me was like this old married couple who the wife had started going there with her husband in the 70s. Her husband had been going, like his family had been going there since the 30s, and it's 2025. That's almost 100 years of generational IndyCar attendance. Um, I'm sure they're not the only people who do that. I'm sure that's not the only time that has happened. And so I really don't see a way where Monaco or the Indy 500 ever leave either of their respective calendars. And so at the end of the Monaco Grand Prix, a lot of the drivers were asked, okay, what are your thoughts? What do you think? Like, how would you alter the race or make it more better? George Russell said something really funny. He said, all the drivers should get the opportunity to like press a button and like release sprinklers on the track, but you can only do it once. So your choice is to either do it during qualifying or during the race. I thought that was a funny idea. Max had suggested letting the people throw bananas to see if somebody slips. A lot of drivers had ideas about what could be done. They looked bored post race. They were bored last year post race, but this isn't about them. This is about the greater, the greater interest of the sport in general and making sure to maintain the legacy of said sport, maintain traditions, XYZ. I want to thank you all for watching again. That's all I have to say about Monaco and the Indy 500. Please make sure to subscribe and comment and stay tuned for my next episode where I'll be discussing qualifying for Formula One. Thank you all for watching and happy racing.